Imagine the future president of the United States
Hmm.
and a future Supreme Court justice and maybe a Wall Street billionaire. Now imagine them completely naked,
Oh, wow.
wrestling in a mud pit in a windowless basement, chanting about death and rebirth.
It's quite an image.
It is, right? But today, we are not talking about internet conspiracies. We're tossing the alien and lizard people theories straight out the window.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Instead, we have a massive stack of historical dossiers here. We've got architectural blueprints and actual legal records detailing the very real documented mechanics of America's most infamous elite society.
Right.
Yale is Skull and Bones.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. I'm glad you're here with us because to the learner listening right now, we are getting into the real stuff today.
We really are. And it is a remarkable paper trail we're looking at. What we're really looking at here isn't, it's not a collection of spooky rituals or college kids just playing dress up.
When you analyze these internal letters and the legal formations in the dossier, you are looking at a master blueprint, is a step-by-step guide on how an American collegiate aristocracy was deliberately manufactured.
Deliberately manufactured.
Yes, manufactured, funded, and then totally insulated from the rest of the democratic public.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how you build that kind of machine, you have to look at the spark that ignited it, right? Because societies like this, they don't just spring up out of nowhere.
Exactly, they are a reaction.
Right. And I was going through the 1832 files in our dossier, and the environment at Yale back then was entirely different than I imagined. So set the scene for us. Why did this specific group of guys suddenly decide, we need to operate in total darkness?
Well, the short answer is panic.
Panic.
Really? In the early 1830s, the United States was swept up in this massive populist movement. It was known as the anti-Masonic fervor. And think of it as a nationwide, very intense public backlash against any kind of secret assembly or hidden power structure. The public demanded absolute transparency from institutions.
Oh, I see.
And this pressure, it hit Yale hard. Their original secret society, the Alpha chapter of Phi Beta Kappa,
The famous one, yeah.
right, which had been operating since 1780,
Yeah.
they essentially caved to the public pressure. They dropped their oath-bound secrecy and threw their doors open.
So suddenly everything is out in the open, like the academic honors, the debate processes, it's all subject to just, normal public scrutiny.
Which absolutely infuriated a senior valedictorian named William Huntington Russell and his classmate, Alphonso Taft.
Because they like the elitism of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To them, egalitarian compromise and public oversight didn't represent fairness. To them, it represented the destruction of prestige.
Wow. Okay, I want to picture this moment. Let's go to the autumn of 1832.
Shit's raining.
Always raining in New Haven. Right. Rain is slicking the cobblestones. Church bells are tolling midnight. Up in a cramped, wood-paneled study on College Street, you have William Huntington Russell sitting by a flickering tallow candle. And he is just absolutely fuming over this compromised honors process at their debate union, the Calliopean Society.
The air is probably thick with tobacco smoke.
Exactly. And Russell, he pulls out a leather ledger that he brought back from Europe. What is in that book?
Well, that ledger is essentially the operating manual for Skull and Bones. Russell had spent the previous academic year studying in Prussia.
Okay.
And while he was there, he embedded himself in the clandestine subculture of the German University Corps.
What are those?
They were these highly disciplined, deeply secretive student brotherhoods, and he brought back their entire organizational structure. He told Taft about their rigorous discipline, their dueling rights.
Dueling rights, like sword fighting.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And their absolute, unquestioning corporate loyalty. He even secured explicit authority from a German Corps member to establish a companion chapter in the U.S.
So they didn't just invent a spooky club out of thin air. They literally franchised a Prussian paramilitary brotherhood.
That is the perfect way to describe it. They imported the death-headed iconography directly from German military insignia.
The skull.
Right, specifically the Totenkopf used by the death-headed hussars.
Wow.
And they combined that with this faux occult worship of a figure they called Eulogia, a mythic goddess of eloquence. So on that rain-soaked night you described, Russell and Taft pledged 15 men to this new brotherhood in the shadows.
Looking at the sheer calculation behind this, it kind of reminds me of a modern tech startup.
How so?
Well, imagine a founder realizing the public board of directors is demanding too much transparency, right? And it's slowing down their vision. What do? They take the company private.
Oh, yeah.
Russell and Taft essentially realized that if you want uncompromised concentrated power, you have to take the power structure private.
The sociological implications of that pivot are massive. They were actively rejecting the standard of the time, which was open, democratic literary debate. They were building an insulated, self-selecting aristocracy.
And it wasn't just a college thing.
No, not at all. This was never meant to end at graduation. Alphonso Taft, for instance, goes on to become U.S. Attorney General and Secretary of War.
Oh, wow.
The architecture of this society was designed from day one to penetrate and direct the federal government.
But ideology and a cool skull logo don't buy influence in Washington. If you want to build a permanent institution that spans generations and effectively runs the country, you need capital.
Massive amounts of it.
Endless amounts of capital. And when I was looking through the financial records in the dossier, I was completely floored. I always assumed this was just funded by wealthy alumni passing the hat, like a really rich frat.
The reality is much darker. The financial foundation of Skull and Bones was built on the back of 19th century global mercantile networks. More specifically, the Anglo-American opium trade in Qing Dynasty China.
Wait, you are telling me the seed money for America's most elite collegiate society was literally an international drug cartel?
Without question.
Yeah.
So William Huntington Russell's first cousin was a man named Samuel Russell. In 1823, Samuel established a commercial merchant syndicate in Canton called Russell and Company.
Okay.
By 1830, they merged with the Boston-based Perkins Syndicate. And this merger turned Russell and Company into the absolute premier American merchant house in the China trade.
So they were dominating the market.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
They acquired Turkish and Indian opium, smuggled it into China, and competed aggressively with massive British enterprises.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the dissonance here. These Yale students are sitting in the dark worshiping an ancient goddess of eloquence, but the whole operation is bankrolled by the era's equivalent of a highly sophisticated multinational narcotics ring. It sounds like a bizarre mix of a fantasy LARP and a ruthless cartel.
It is deeply cynical, yes. But in the context of 19th century capitalism, the opium trade was the era's ultimate venture capital. Yeah, the sheer volume of wealth it generated built massive chunks of the American banking, transportation, and industrial sectors.
So it all trickles down.
Exactly. That merchant wealth interlocked with prominent New England dynasties, and the sons of those dynasties were funneled directly into Yale and subsequently tapped for Skull and Bones. But the real genius of the society was how they formalized and protected that money.
Right, because having rich parents is one thing, but institutionalizing that wealth so it lasts forever is another. How did they actually shield the cash?
Well, in 1856, a bonesman named Daniel Coit Gilman,
Who later became president of Johns Hopkins, right?
yes, the very same, he co-founded a legal parent entity under Connecticut state law. It was originally called the Russell Trust, later renamed the Russell Trust Association, or the RTA.
Let me guess, it was structured as an educational charity.
Registered as a tax-exempt educational organization.
Oh man, that is effectively a 19th century dark money super PAC combined with a family office. By registering it that way, the state of Connecticut literally couldn't audit the opium money. The RTA holds the title to their real estate, it manages the endowments, and it acts as an impenetrable legal shield.
And it was incredibly generous to its initiates. The records show the RTA provided graduation gifts of $15,000 to new members.
15 grand back then.
Yes. In the late 19th century, that was a staggering fortune.
I read they also got a grandfather clock, which is, a nice touch, just a casual grandfather clock and enough money to never work again.
Right. And the RTA even bought them an entire island.
Deer Island, right.
Yes, Deer Island, a private 40-acre retreat on the St. Lawrence River, strictly for alumni networking.
Unbelievable.
Think about the psychological freedom that kind of institutional wealth provides. The RTA guaranteed intergenerational security. When these young men left Yale, they could take massive risks.
Because they have a safety net.
Yep, exactly. Whether in government, running for office, or helping form early intelligence agencies, they did it without any fear of financial ruin. They were permanently insulated from the economic realities that govern the rest of the country.
Okay, so if you've just amassed this untaxable fortune in 1856 and your entire philosophy is based on secrecy, your biggest threat is exposure, right? You can't just operate out of a rented room in a busy college town.
No, absolutely not.
You need a physical fortress to hide the wealth, the documents, and the rituals.
They needed a physical manifestation of their exclusivity, a building that signaled absolute exclusion to anyone walking past it.
And that building is universally known as the Tomb. Located at 64 High Street in New Haven, it was a complete black box to the public until a very specific night in September 1876. I saw the architectural breakdowns in the dossier based on this event, but I want you to walk me through how we actually got these blueprints.
It is one of the most audacious moments in Yale's history. It's late Victorian New Haven. A cold wind is whipping through a deserted stone alleyway behind High Street. A group of undergraduates, who called themselves the Order of the File and Claw, decide they're going to breach the unbreachable.
Just a group of kids.
Just undergrads.
Huh.
Led by a student named William Henry Upton, they take a heavy steel file to the iron bars of a basement grate.
Just grinding away in the freezing dark.
For hours, they take turns, filing until their hands literally bleed. Finally, the iron bar snaps. Upton uses an iron claw tool to rip out the nails, holding a wire mesh screen, and they squeeze through this impossibly tight opening, dropping heavily onto the pitch-black cellar floor of the tomb.
My heart would be pounding out of my chest.
Oh, definitely. And when they strike a match, what they document provides the clearest anatomical breakdown of the building we have to this day.
So tell me what the match illuminates, because from the outside, this place looks like a literal mausoleum.
The basement is surprisingly utilitarian, but with a macabre twist. They find a stone sink and a heavy door marked Joe Waram, which was their lavatory. And inside, it's continuously illuminated and decorated with a dilapidated human skull.
Of course it is. Why have normal bathroom tiles when you can have human remains?
Precisely. From there, Upton and his crew creep up the creaking stairs to the first floor and enter room 324.
What's in there?
That's the primary general meeting hall. The matchlight reveals heavily frescoed walls, framed portraits, and a massive dining hall. Hanging from the high ceilings like ancient battle banners are rolls of secret society song sheets.
Wow.
They also find a lounge with a large ivory carving. Interestingly, later historical accounts note that this space would eventually house a literal shrine to President William Howard Taft,
Wait, a shrine?
filled with his personal campaign ephemera, just right there in the lounge.
It's wild, but the real target was always the second floor, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
the Sanctum Sanctorum. Room 322. Upton forces open a heavy mahogany door, and they step into the inner temple.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The light reflects off a black marble hearth inlaid with a giant handcrafted brass and ivory emblem of the skull and bones. The room is filled with open vaults, heavy red velvet drapes, coffins, and grim funereal artwork. Real human skulls are mounted on pedestals.
It's like a haunted house designed by billionaires.
And it gets darker. It's worth noting that intruders in the 20th century reported seeing a private chamber containing elite military iconography,
Like what?
including swastikas, collected as spoils of war or dark historical curiosities.
It is intense, and looking at the exterior architecture, I mean, it was built in phases, starting in 1856 in this Egypto-Doric style utilizing Portland brownstone.
Yeah.
Henry Austin is the architect most widely credited.
Right, largely because it heavily resembles the Egyptian revival gates he designed for the Grove Street Cemetery.
So a literal graveyard aesthetic.
Exactly.
His windowless block, blind bays, 12-foot-high solid iron bores, and a flat roof secured by thick tin and iron plating, specifically engineered to prevent anyone from breaking in from above.
Over the decades, they expanded it. They added a rear block, a north wing to make the facade symmetrical, and in 1912, they added these towering neo-Gothic structures in the rear garden
You enclose it. Yeah.
to create a completely enclosed private courtyard.
Let's analyze the purpose of that design. Why build a windowless bunker in the middle of a bustling academic campus? I was just thinking about that. If you build a structure with no windows and iron plating on the roof, you are psychologically telegraphing to the people inside that the outside world is inherently hostile.
Yes.
It's a form of architectural brainwashing, isn't it?
That is a crucial insight. The physical space is a tool of psychological manipulation. The windowless facade isn't merely about keeping the neutrals out.
Neutrals being their derogatory term for non-members.
Exactly. It's not just about keeping them out. It is about trapping the initiate's reality inside. When you step through those 12-foot iron doors, you leave the democratic public world completely behind. You enter a highly controlled environment where the society's rules, its rewritten history, and its mythology are the only valid realities.
And the centerpiece of that rewritten history is a number. When Upton's crew breached the Sanctum Sanctorum, they saw this number stamped on everything. Wax seals, letterheads, carved into the wood right below the skull and crossbones, the number 322.
Right.
For over a century, people thought this was just, a frat code.
The public floated various theories over the years. A popular one was that it meant 1832, Corps II, indicating they were the second chapter of a German parent corps.
Or the mythological theory that 322 AD was the year their made-up goddess, Eulogia, ascended to heaven.
What's fascinating here is that the internal documents confirm something much more specific and, frankly, much more ideological. The number refers to 322 BC.
322 BC. Break that down for us. Why does a 19th century Connecticut secret society care about an obscure year in classical antiquity?
Because 322 BC is the year the famous Athenian orator Demosthenes died. Following the Lamian War, the ancient Greek city-states finally collapsed to Antipater's Macedonian forces.
Right.
To escape capture, Demosthenes committed suicide by poison. But in classical history, his death symbolizes something much larger. It marks the definitive, undeniable end of Athenian democracy.
Wow.
It is the exact moment the Athenian constitution was forced to transform into a plutocracy.
So a system where political franchise, the right to vote and govern, was restricted exclusively to wealthy landowners.
Exactly. Wealth equals power.
Let me make sure I'm hearing this right. They adopted 322 BC as the 0 year for their internal calendar. They call it Anno Demostheni. When they send a letter, they subtract 322 years from the current year.
Yes, that's their system.
I have to push back on this a little bit, because it's one thing to read some classics in a Yale seminar and think it's cool to pretend you're a fallen Greek statesman,
Sure.
But is there any evidence that adopting a calendar from ancient Greece actually dictates how a 20th century senator or a Wall Street CEO votes? Or is this just incredibly pretentious historical cosplay?
I get why you'd ask that. It sounds like cosplay until you look at the psychological conditioning behind it.
Oh.
Symbols shape worldviews, especially when applied to young, impressionable minds.
Right.
By adopting the exact year democracy died and plutocracy began as their ideological starting point, they're explicitly communicating their core belief system. When you bring a 20-year-old into an environment that constantly reinforces the idea that they are the sole inheritors of an ancient tradition of elite rule,
It changes them.
it normalizes anti-democratic behavior. It creates a mindset where operating in secret, subverting public oversight, and consolidating wealth isn't just acceptable. It is a noble historical duty.
So they see themselves as the aristocrats.
They see themselves as the aristocratic plutocrats tasked with guiding national affairs because they fundamentally believe the democratic populace cannot be trusted with that power.
Okay, that makes sense. It really does. But to actually enforce that psychology for a lifetime, you can't just hand a 20-year-old a grandfather clock and a pin and hope they keep quiet for 50 years. You need a binding mechanism. How do they actually ensure these initiates don't just walk out and spill everything?
Through a highly structured, systematic process of psychological breakdown and weaponized vulnerability.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this, starting with tap day.
Mhm.
Every spring, 15 juniors are selected by the outgoing senior delegation. A senior walks up to a junior's dorm room, knocks heavily, puts a hand on their shoulder, and delivers a very specific line.
I offer you an election to the so-called Skull and Bones. Do you accept?
And the moment they say yes, the disorientation tactics begin. The physical rituals inside the tomb are designed to exhaust the initiate and break down their individual ego. The dossier outlines some wild stuff. Initiates are placed inside those wooden coffins we mentioned earlier, sometimes clothed, sometimes completely naked, chanting the word reborn over and over. It's a literal, symbolic death to the outside world of the neutrals and a resurrection into the order.
They also utilize physical boundary breaking. The documents detail wrestling matches conducted in mud pits inside the tomb's enclosed courtyard.
The ones they built out back.
Right. The purpose of hazing like this isn't just arbitrary torture. Sociologically, shared trauma and physical exhaustion lower cognitive defenses. It makes the subject highly receptive to new programming.
But the mud in the coffins, that's just the warm-up, right? The absolute core of the society's control structure happens during these extended evening sessions called connubial bliss, or CB.
Yes. This is the mechanism that binds them for life.
So each initiate is required to stand in front of an old painting inside the tomb. The painting depicts a woman, and the words connubial bliss are written above it. Standing there in front of the other 14 members, the initiate must deliver an exhaustive autobiographical monologue detailing their complete sexual history.
Everything.
Every intimate personal secret, every deep emotional vulnerability, every source of shame. And immediately following that, they face a life history session where they open themselves up to intense, relentless interrogation from the cohort.
We must note the historical demographics of who was performing these confessions. For over a century, this extreme vulnerability was demanded exclusively of white Protestant men.
Right, and just looking at the timeline of the society's evolution, that exclusivity was only broken in 1965 when they admitted their first black member. And later, there was a massive institutional crisis regarding gender.
A very severe internal clash in 1991 and 1992.
What happened?
Well, the undergraduate delegation decided to tap 7 women for the incoming class. But a powerful faction of older alumni, most notably led by the conservative political commentator William F. Buckley, Jr., vehemently opposed this change.
They didn't want it at all.
No. They went to extreme lengths. They secured a court injunction and physically changed the locks on the Tuma's 12-foot iron doors to prevent the women from entering.
Wow. Which triggered a massive mail-in vote among all living alumni to resolve the standoff. The final tally was 368 to 300 in favor of inclusion, effectively ending over 150 years of male exclusivity.
Right.
And to be clear, our goal here isn't to take a stance on the politics of their alumni dispute, but to highlight how fiercely protective the older generations were of the specific parameters of that inner circle.
Because that inner circle's power relies entirely on the efficacy of the connubial bliss ritual. When everyone in that room confesses their deepest shame, it creates a profound form of mutual trust building through shared peril.
Think about your own college experience. Now imagine that instead of just joining a fraternity, you walked into a room and handed 14 strangers the material to completely destroy your reputation.
It's terrifying.
It reminds me of the Cold War strategy of mutually assured destruction, or MAD.
Yes.
It is weaponized vulnerability. If everyone in that room has dirt on everyone else, nobody can ever break the circle without destroying themselves in the process.
That analogy is flawless. By surrendering their most private secrets, they place ultimate leverage into the hands of their peers. Fast forward 20 years. These 15 individuals leave Yale and rise to the highest echelons of intelligence, international finance, and politics.
Right.
Because of that weaponized vulnerability, their deepest loyalties don't lie with their political party, their corporate board, or even their public constituency.
Yeah.
Their deepest unbreakable loyalty remains with the 14 other people who hold their secrets.
And when you breed that kind of untouchable entitlement where your only accountability is to a private plutocratic club, it inevitably bleeds out into the real world.
It doesn't stay hidden forever.
Right. That entitlement doesn't stay confined to the brownstone walls. Which brings us to the most explosive historical controversy in the dossier, the theft of human remains.
Specifically, the desecration of the grave of the legendary Chiricahua Apache leader, Geronimo.
To really grasp the gravity of this, I want to jump to a scene from 1986. We are a long way from the muddy courtyards of New Haven. We are in an executive conference room high up in a skyscraper above Park Avenue in Manhattan.
Very different setting.
Very different. The air conditioning has a deep ambient hum. The roar of the city traffic is completely muffled behind thick glass.
The exact sanitized corporate environment where the Russell Trust Association wields its real power.
Yes. Sitting at a polished glass table is Ned Anderson, the former chairman of the San Carlos Apache tribe. Across from him is Endicott Key Davidson, a man in a dark wool suit. Davidson is the senior counsel for the RTA, the legal shield we discussed earlier. And Davidson doesn't offer any pleasantries. He reaches down, lifts a custom-built heavy mahogany box, and places it squarely on the glass table. The brass latches click open. He pushes the box across to Anderson. Inside, resting on black velvet, is a glass display case containing an aged human skull.
And we need to explain why Anderson took this meeting in the first place. For months, he had been carrying a piece of anonymous correspondence leaked from inside New Haven.
Oh, right.
It included a photograph of a skull in a glass case, and crucially, a copy of an internal Skull and Bones logbook entry from 1918.
The 1918 entry. It detailed how 6 Bonesmen who were serving as U.S. Army volunteers at Fort Sill, Oklahoma during World War I dug into Geronimo's grave under the cover of darkness.
A group that allegedly included Prescott Bush.
Prescott Bush, the father of President George H.W. Bush. The logbook claimed they stole his skull, some bones, and his ceremonial horse gear and brought them back to display in the tomb.
So Anderson was there to reclaim the genuine remains of his people's legendary leader.
But as Anderson leans forward to inspect the bone structure in that mahogany box, he realizes something is deeply wrong. He looks up at Davidson and says, "This is not Geronimo. This is the skull of a child.
A child.
The jaw is too delicate, the cranium is too small. Davidson's expression is ice cold. He insists that the 1918 ledger is nothing more than a historical student hoax, and that the RTA possesses no other remains. Anderson refuses to accept the child's skull, closes the lid, and the clandestine handoff completely fails.
For decades, the society hid behind that exact defense, that the Fort Sill ledger was just morbid boasting, a hoax to impress younger members.
But the historical record blew wide open in 2006.
Yes, thanks to a historian named Mark Workman. He was digging through Yale's Sterling Memorial Library archives and unearthed a letter from 1918. It was written by a bonesman named Winter Mead to the Society's secretary, F. Drew B. Davison.
What did it say?
The language in the letter leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity. It explicitly states, quote, "The skull of the worthy Geronimo the Terrible, exhumed from its tomb at Fort Sill by your club, is now safe inside the tomb, and Bone One is being illuminated by its polished skull."
That is a smoking gun. It completely destroyed the hoax defense, and it led directly to a major federal lawsuit. In February 2009, 20 direct descendants of Geronimo filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia.
The case was Geronimo v. Obama.
The plaintiffs named President Barack Obama, Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, Yale University, and the Order of Skull and Bones as co-defendants. They demanded the immediate return of the remains under NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act.
And the legal outcome of this case is vital to understanding how the RTA functions in modern society.
Right. Keeping strictly to the documented legal mechanics here, the descendants didn't get their day in court. In July 2010, U.S. District Judge Richard W. Roberts dismissed the lawsuit.
On what grounds?
He ruled that the federal government had not waived sovereign immunity for claims regarding remains stolen before NAGPRA was enacted in 1990. Furthermore, he ruled that the plaintiffs lacked the legal standing to compel a private entity like the Russell Trust Association to return unverified, unmarked historic remains.
So the legal fortress built in 1856 by Daniel Coit Gilman functioned exactly as intended. The RTA held firm.
So what does this all mean? We have grave robbery and attempted handoff of a child's skull on Park Avenue, and a federal lawsuit dismissed on jurisdictional grounds.
Yeah.
Help me synthesize this. What does the Geronimo controversy actually tell us about the core identity of Skull and Bones?
It perfectly encapsulates their entire worldview. Taking the skull of a legendary indigenous warrior isn't an act of morbid curiosity or college pranking. It is the ultimate assertion of power.
Yeah.
It is a manufactured elite class claiming the inherent right to own the history, the legacy, and the sacred relics of a conquered people, simply to use them as macabre decorations in a private clubhouse.
It's treating history as a trophy.
Exactly. It reinforces the exact mindset created by the 322 BC mythology and the connubial bliss rituals, the absolute belief that they exist entirely above the laws, customs, and moral frameworks that govern the democratic public.
That is incredibly chilling. When you step back and look at the entirety of this dossier, the picture is undeniable. Skull and Bones is not a quirky collegiate club. It is a highly calculated, multi-generational machine.
A machine engineered for absolute control.
They took the militant, secretive discipline of Prussian core culture. They funded it with the boundless, untaxable capital of the global opium trade.
Right.
They housed it inside an impenetrable Egypto-Doric architectural fortress specifically designed for sensory deprivation. And they bound its members together for life using the psychological blackmail of weaponized vulnerability.
All to forge an enduring American elite that pulls the levers of power far away from public scrutiny.
And that is why studying these blueprints is so critical for our listeners. Understanding the mechanics of Order 322 is a masterclass in how power actually insulates itself.
It strips away the illusion that aristocracy is natural. It proves that institutional influence, whether in real-world governance, global finance, or legal outcomes, is deliberately, meticulously engineered behind closed doors long after these students leave New Haven.
Which brings me back to where we started. We set out to bypass the locked front doors and look at the actual documented blueprints. But we've focused so much today on the incredible analog lengths they went to in order to keep their secrets hidden in the 19th and 20th centuries.
The physical architecture of secrecy was paramount to their survival.
Right, the windowless brownstone, the iron-plated roofs, the heavy mahogany boxes, the paper ledgers and wax seals. But it makes you wonder, how does a machine like this survive today? In a world of ubiquitous digital surveillance where everyone has a smartphone in their pocket and massive data leaks are a daily occurrence, how does a society like Order 322 adapt?
It's a great question.
Can a purely analog secret society survive a digital world, or are the real teams of today no longer built out of brownstone and iron, but constructed from encrypted offshore servers, untraceable shell companies, and ironclad NDAs?